think, all right, guys. My name is Dr. Sharnael Wolverton-Sehon. I am with Fire International, and I am super, super excited tonight to have Dr. Richard Bartlett on with us. I actually, the way I found, everything is synchronicity. I love how energy works and how when you're ready, then the right people vibe at that and you just find people. But I work at a wellness center, among other things, and there's a doctor there who I gave him my book, Signs of Miracles, and he kind of like thumbed through it, and then he saw the Merkaba right here, and he thumbed through it and saw different things having to do with the timelines and different things like that. And he was like, you have got to meet this guy, Dr. Richard Bartlett. Have you ever heard of that? I was like, no. And he tells me that you are from Seattle and that, my daughter's from up there. And he was like, you do classes online and all these things. And I went to your website and found out you were doing this like online session things. And I just felt like totally God calling me to connect with that. Got onto that. It was, oh my God, it was epic and awesome. And since then, actually did one of your group sessions. And then after that, then I find out, you don't even tell me till later, but I found out that you have written some books. And so I was like, oh my gosh, you didn't even bring that up at any time we're talking. And so one of the books I just got in the mail yesterday, I haven't got a chance to look at it, but The Physics of Miracles, hello, The Science of Miracles, The Physics of Miracles. And so I'm excited to dive into this too. But what I really loved about, and then I found you on Facebook, and but in the process of all that, I think it was the group session, you were talking about superheroes, and I noticed that you had on a Green Lantern ring, which I was like, I found my people, because I'm obsessed with Superman, like ridiculous. I have on Superman ring. I've been wearing it for I don't know how long. Everyone who knows me, my entire house is Superman and Wonder Woman, and the parallels to me is what it means to me is having to do with us being supernatural, us being sent here from another place, us being called to do what we're supposed to. And there's actually like a trailer that I heard a couple years ago, and the trailer is the father, talking to the son, and he says, he goes, even though you were raised human, you are not one of them. And then it shows like Superman doing all these crazy things. And he says, they're a great people, Kal-El. They wish to be. They only lack the light to show them the way. And then he says, this reason above all, their capacity for good, I have sent them you, my only son. And when I would play that over and over and over and over and over, because every time I just would get these chills, like it was God in me, or God out there, all the God, God source energy talking to me about me and my DNA. And I taught on this and still teach on this for the last 2 decades. I have a teaching called The Bionic Bride, and I have like so much stuff. And then Wonder Woman movie came out, and now it's like Star Wars, and specifically the Star Wars called the Awakening. I think it's the one where Rey came out, because I can connect with her and her manifesting things and her becoming a Jedi. And then the dude's sitting there, and she's like, you will bring me you will drop your weapon and untether my things. And he's like, what? And then she says it like with authority. And then he's like, oh yeah, I'm going to do that. And then he's like, hey, and you're going to drop your weapon on the way out. And he's like, yes. And so it's like, this is like real. This is not just a movie. This is our inheritance. This is who we are. This is our DNA. And so when I saw you with the green ring and you were talking about a little bit with that, and then yesterday or the day before, you had on Batman video, and I was like, oh my God, this guy is so amazing. So yeah, oh yes, there it is. So anyway, super excited to have you. What is this now? Oh, is this Spider-Man? Oh, yeah, I'm sitting here drinking from Superman. But my living room, my bedroom, my bedspread, like everything is Superman, because for me, it's like an anchor to remember who I am, where I came from, what's available to me, what what all of us have the ability to do whenever we connect with source and God in us and all that fullness of the DNA. So thank you for coming, and thanks for being here with us. And tell us a little bit about your journey. You know, I know you have a couple medical degrees, one of them from Bastyr, which is one of the best in the country. And but tell us a little bit about your journey and how Matrix Energetics started and all that.
Well, since you're talking about Superman, I'll talk about Superman. I agree with you. I'm going to be 66, I think, in a couple of months. And I grew up with the 50s Superman, George Reeves. Now, George was a very, I mean, for a young kid, just amazing, the nobility of the character. It's funny, though, because you see how society has been dumbed down. The men have been feminized, the women have been masculized. It's all been turned inside out and upside down, because at that time, when Clark Kent, meek-mannered reporter, he wasn't very meek or very mannered. I mean, get out of the way, Lois, you know, it's here, I'll save you, you know. He was like the Superman of today, you know. He was that truth, justice, and American way. That's what I grew up with. That's what I modeled. That's what I loved. I loved Superman and Batman. I like the Batman part because Batman doesn't have any special powers except for he was just obsessive, you know. And I've been plenty obsessive. You don't go to medical school twice unless you're obsessive. I mean, it's that's 8 years, you know. Wait a minute, I think I missed something the first time. I better go back, you know. And the cool thing, well, there's so many cool things. I thought I was going back to Bastyr, to naturopathic school. First degree was chiropractor in 1987. And when I got to school there, my son, my first son, my only son, no, he's not my only, I have two, but the Superman thing, right? My son, my only son, now the son becomes the father becomes the son. And it's true enough. He looks just like me. But my son was born with bronchitis, asthma, allergies, got pneumonia every third week of his life. And he was very, very, very ill. So I tried all sorts of things to help him. We tried medicine, we tried acupuncture. We took him to every single one of my chiropractic instructors in school, and they were good. They were really good. And nothing really worked that well. There was one technique that helped one time, but it didn't last. And so a couple of things about that. The only thing that gave him relief is I would put garlic and castor oil and onion packs on his chest at night, and that's the only thing that probably kept him from dying. I mean, literally, it kept him breathing. He was so bad. We tried medication, you know, which is basically medication to open up the lungs. It's basically speed. So yeah, he was angry, he was pissed off, and still couldn't breathe. He was coughing. He'd be banging his head on the toilet or something, you know. And so none of that worked that well. And it took me on a journey to try and find the answer for him. And so I guess, I mean, I'm still fairly okay smart, but that back then I was, what, 27 when I went to school there? Something like that. My mind was able to handle the full curriculum of 34 credit hours a semester, and I studied in the library after classes. I studied the weird stuff they weren't teaching, because I thought to myself, hey, if what they're teaching isn't working and nobody else is doing anything that works, I think it's up to me to do this. Call it what you will, but my thought was I better do this myself. So what happened is I learned all these techniques, and I started to put them together. I know over 30 techniques or so and mastered all of them, but it all becomes a blur after a while. And what I found is I would apply a technique to a person in a given situation and it would work. But it wouldn't necessarily work for every person every time, of course. So to me, that was more about rapport. I started to even develop that idea as a chiropractic student. I got very, very good at producing results. So good, in fact, I got thrown out of clinic for practicing magic without a license. I got put on suspension for 2 weeks. And it's quite hilarious because you're talking about this alleged virus, I'll call it alleged virus that's going through right now. The media is the real virus, but that's neither here nor there. It's disinformation. I got really sick with it and was well in 4 days, and I'm sure I'm immune to it. Vitamin C works well. Sunshine, that just had a presser that said sunshine will kill it. Gee, what a shock. Light will actually kill darkness. Here's a surprise. Of course, that's a polarity thing, you know, but light will wreak havoc on darkness. And so anyway, what happened was this virus came through school and it was knocking everybody out. Everybody, it was, you know, an enclosed community of students, everybody got sick. All the teachers were sick. And I had taken something called total body modification at that point, TBM. And I take Dr. Frank's voice on when I say it. And in 30 minutes after a 4-day seminar, I came home and my son, I did what I learned at the seminar. My son was well, was never sick again with that problem. Was healed instantly. And so that got my attention, obviously. So then I became the big TBM guy, you know, in the clinic, and I was doing all sorts of illegal stuff. I mean, I would come to school and I was not following protocols. I was reaching in my bag, pulling out magic, and truly was practicing magic without a license, but it was getting people well. And to the degree where I would go in on a Saturday morning in the student clinic. It was a small town, Irving, Texas. The only thing it's famous for is the Dallas Cowboys. That's where they are. But I would go in and understand everybody's competing in this small town for patients. I didn't have to do that. Word of mouth, people would fill the waiting room on a Saturday morning. I only did hours on Saturday. And the whole day, the clinic was filled with my people. And so I never pounded a door, never brought in a relative, never dressed up my dog to look like a patient, you know, all the stuff that was going on. And so they hated me. My classmates hated me, and understandably so. I get that. And so what happened is when this virus came through, I had a vial that said EBV. It's a Epstein-Barr virus, okay? So it was just a vibrational thing, right? And so I'd put it on the body, test a muscle, and if it went weak, I'd fix it, and they were well. They were well 30 minutes later. That's so I'd go back and play or whatever. So I'd already been thrown out of clinic for 2 weeks, suspended, practicing medicine without a license, magic and medicine. And the clinic director's wife called me. And she said, now, I know you and my husband haven't exactly seen eye to eye. And I said, yeah. She goes, but I'm face down with this terrible virus. I can't function. Would you be willing to treat me? And she called me to my home. And I said, sure. And I came over to the clinic. I fixed her. 15 minutes later, she was up and running and just totally fine. And so then 30 minutes later, I get a call. It's the clinic director. And he goes, now, I know we haven't exactly seen eye to eye, but would you be willing? And I had to say no to him. I didn't want to, but when you come up against something that is completely outside of your model for how reality functions, you're either going to get really angry or you're going to get really amazed, right? Possibilities are, okay, you can ignore, well, there's three. You can ignore it, reject it, right? Move on with your life. I can't probably imagine how many people have done these things because they didn't have a reference for anything else could be different.
Right.
Because what I went through with my son, I had tons of references for how things could change, right? So I said no to him. I felt bad about it, but it was the right thing. So anyway, fast forward through me being in a spiritual community, treating Elizabeth Clare Prophet, who was head of the Summit Lighthouse. I became her doctor because of what I could do. I was treating 650 people who were on the staff, and that became, it was a logistic nightmare because I'd work 15 hours a day, 7 days a week for $5 an hour. And so, so it was kind of one of those things where I was really, really a servant of the people. But I really developed the skill sets, and working on a spiritual being like this Elizabeth Clare Prophet, very powerful and real person. I learned so much. And there was so much grace and so much that was gifted that I can't say I'm responsible for anything. I wouldn't call myself a healer. But anyway, after about 8 years in there, I suddenly got the impetus I needed to go back to medical school. So I needed to go back to naturopathic school. And I literally got permission from the Ascended Master, El Moria, at the altar, said, you should go back. And I was shocked because she loved me and wouldn't have wanted me to leave. So I did, and here's what happened. This is where the Superman thing comes in. I go to school. They tell me it'll take 2 years to graduate. They lied. Well, they didn't really lie. They just didn't know what they were doing. They had no advanced standard program. So I had to make the advanced standing program for myself because they kept scheduling me for classes. I did not have the background classes to take, and so it kept delaying me further and further. So it took me 4 years. I had to actually go for 4 years when they promised me 2. That was a bit annoying. But what happened in the 3rd month, because I did not have any skills. I was a bass player before I went to medical school. I didn't have any skills, so I'd never held a job. I tried McDonald's, that didn't work out so well in the drive-through on a Saturday night after a Dallas. That was terrible. that was an experience you never want to have. 250 people came through in under an hour, and I wound up owing, I think, $2,000 a day. You can't keep track of that. So regardless, what happened is this. I had to drive back to Montana where I had a chiropractic license in order to keep my family alive, because they did not have funding at the time at Baxter either. And so I would work all weekend in my clinic in Montana, and then I would drive back and go to school and take another test. So this is what I call the Charles Lindbergh School of Enlightenment, where you're going across the Atlantic and you're bungee corded in because you're floating out of your body, right? It was like that. So one of those, I'm going through a snowstorm in the mountain passes of Montana, and I get to where I have to be to start my day with my patients just in time to start, 8 o'clock in the morning. I've driven all night, okay? Wow. I worked until like 7 o'clock at night. Now, the last person that came in, and this is in both of the books, and it's kind of a famous story, but it's true. Last person that came in was a mom with her little girl. Now, I had, in that spiritual community, that a lot of people knew me. So she'd taken the child to an eye specialist, and the child had a lazy eye. And so the doctor said, well, I don't think we'll do surgery yet. I think we'll just watch it. The standard answer, right? I think we'll just watch it and see what happens. And she said, what do you think, Dr. Bartlett? Well, I was out of my freaking mind. I was so tired, and I'd been drinking coffee that had pond scum on the top. You know, it was so acidic that, I was drinking like a 64-ounce thing just to drive. So I was whacked. And I started talking about George Reeves as Superman, because there was a metaphor there that I was picking up, which was this one episode where this little girl was blind, and she wrote into the Daily Planet to win a raffle, win an essay to fly around the world with Superman. Well, wow. She didn't believe Superman. She didn't believe Superman existed. It was a trick. If she won, she wanted to force the Daily Planet to admit there was no Superman, or go find her dad who had joined the Foreign Legion. So the rest of the story is they were out driving in the car when she was a little baby, mom, dad, and her, and the dad hit a telephone pole and had an accident, and the little girl was blind afterwards. And the marriage broke up after that because of all the guilt and shame and everything. So now here's Clark in front of this little girl being told he doesn't exist. He's kind of looking at his Superman outfit and goes, I think I exist. I do believe in, it's kind of like the Peter Pan thing, clap your hands if you believe in fairies. And so he bends a poker from the fireplace around her. She goes, you are Superman. He's going, I exist. He goes, yes, I am, honey. So the rest of the story, he flies her around the world. They fly into the New York apartment, and there's mom and dad holding hands because they've already gotten together. Superman flew around the world and found dad, got them together, and then took a slow trip around the world so they could get to know each other again. And, it brings tears to my eyes even today. And I was like, and I looked at the lady, she's looking at me like, what the hell, right? And I said, and I have no idea why I just told you that. And I turned around, and here was George Reeves as Superman, full color hologram, big as life, cape flapping in the wind, small, one of that smug justice, truth, and the American way smile on his face, and an x-ray beam, which had to be yellow because you have to be able to see these things, right, in your delusions, came out of his eyes, went into the little girl, and I could see this dark, snarly blockage there. Now, there's a problem. Children bite. I knew this because there's a technique, I'll show you. There's a technique where you can go in and you can do intraoral cranial techniques, And that could help because the sphenoid is right here. That could help the eyes. And that might be able to help a lazy eye. But one of the things I tried with my son when he was so sick was intraoral cranial. And he bit me like a snapping turtle. And in fact, he held on, and it was so painful. I'm not afraid to admit, I was pounding on his head, let go, let go. He's going, "Arr." And I was going to flush his head down I was going to put his head in the toilet because I know a snapping turtle will let go if you do that. Because I had a snapping turtle when I was a kid. And he finally let go. So I looked at the kid. I said, I'm not doing that, right? That's the one thing I thought that I knew how to do. But because I was seeing Superman, and there was this beam going into her head, I touched where I saw. That's all I knew how to do. And this flash of light happened, and this energy went through her, broke up the blockage. Her eyes started sparkling this weird way. And then she looked at me and she goes, there's two of you. So she was seeing for the first time with binocular vision. No more lazy eye, instantly corrected. She ran into walls for about a day, but it stayed like that. The next day, I'm going to start my day again. And I thought, oh my God, I was just so insane last night. And so it's a little room. I'd made a clinic downstairs. I'd lived upstairs with my family and I had a clinic downstairs, little room. And I'm sitting there and I'm talking to this, he's a worker and a friend of mine. And I'm telling him the story. And he says, Doc, your knee's touching my knee. I said, so? He says, Doc, the energy in your knee is moving my bones in my knee and my leg. I'm like, okay. And then all of a sudden, Superman walks out of the wall, through the wall, and says, can I help? Wow. Like, oh no. And I said, sure, Clark, come on over, Kal-El, right? And like in the third Superman movie with Christopher Reeves, he merged into me and well, here we are. So wow. That's what happened. And after that, every single person I touched, there was a response, an instantaneous response. And I started to be able to do things, bones would move, things would happen without me doing anything. Now, later getting it, now I had to try and explain this to myself, and I got a student who was also advanced here who wanted to study with me because he'd heard about what I could do. This was a couple of years later. And so he came and started studying with me, and he's a real smart guy. His name's Dr. Mark Dunn, brilliant clairvoyant, now great healer, good friend, although we don't talk that often. But Mark wanted to understand what I was doing. And so I started looking at quantum physics because there was no other explanation. I couldn't figure out what in the world, you know. And I came upon the idea, which I wrote in that first book, that basically there is no such thing as a division between the quantum world and the macro world. There cannot be. How can a house, if a house is built upon, you know, a certain foundation, you can't take away the foundation and expect the house to either it works or it doesn't. If it works, it's going to all the way down, if that's what's real, which I doubt actually. But the point is, there cannot be an artificial division where these set of rules apply here and these set of rules apply here. No, it's based upon our perceptual bias. Yeah. So it's the way we look at information that colors how we're able to perceive changes in our apparent, what I call virtual reality. Now I call it virtual reality because according to the quantum physicists, and I don't know what sort of drugs they were taking, but they were taking them. Einstein, you probably don't know this, but Einstein's brain, which came up missing, by the way, tested positive for LSD, psilocybin, and cocaine. He was taking a lot of cocaine. In fact, they first thought he'd had a brain aneurysm and died because of all the cocaine he was sticking up his nose. He was trying to solve those equations. So people don't hear these things, but a lot of what we call science has really just been hallucinations. We put it together. The same thing with Schrodinger and all these people. They were way out there. They were studying, you know, Eastern religion and magic and looking at the ancient texts from the Hindus. And that's where these ideas came together. Now, it doesn't mean it's true. I like what Richard Bandler said. Richard Bandler said, I was in a seminar with him, and he said this, I loved it. He said, I've abandoned the search for truth, and now I'm just looking for a useful lie. So that's kind of how I look at everything. Whatever I say is happening, like whatever I wrote in those books and so on, it doesn't mean that's the way things really work.
Right.
It just suggests a possible model. And if the model isn't enough rapport with a person's field of awareness, and the perceptual bias can then temporarily, sometimes in the blink of an eye, be set aside, that then allows for an interval or an opening in consciousness to allow for something different to occur. Now, it's fortunate in a sense that the matrix energetics experience, and that's what the first set of CDs that I did were supposed to be called. It was after the Jimi Hendrix experience, of course. It was fortunate in a sense that that field got so strong that just raising my hand in the air, people would fall unconscious, or they'd start spinning in a circle, or they'd go into spontaneous yoga positions, or all sorts of stuff, all sorts of crazy stuff, hallucinating, seeing the walls opening up. So that was an effect. Now that effect does not mean that that has any great intrinsic value. It just means it's something you can notice, and if you can notice it, it gives you an interval to change your awareness enough to allow for a crack of daylight to get through the darkness and maybe illumine a new possibility. And that's what the seminars, when the seminars hit big, and they did, I was on Coast to Coast radio right when my first book came out. I mean, the weekend it came out. It was just weird, the synchronicity. And we talked, and the guy he didn't understand what the hell I was talking about. Finally asked me about angels, because that was a topic he could discuss with me. He didn't understand the whole quantum world. You know, like if this is physical, and if you're made of something that's, here's the structure, and then you've got the anatomy, and the anatomy is made of systems, and the systems are made up of organs, and the organs are made up of tissues, and the tissues are made up of molecules, the molecules of cells, rather. The cells are made of molecules, molecules are made of atoms, and atoms don't exist. Here we are, you know, because that's what you've got. You've got something that actually doesn't exist. 99.9 something infinitesimal decimal, it isn't there. It's like a grain of sand in a football field. So that's what the atom is. And we don't even know if we've ever measured the atom. What if the atom doesn't exist? What if what we measured was the electron? Mm-hmm. Because, and then how likely is it that we can trust our measurements? If we're measuring the electron with something that's powered by the electron, do you think there might be a few artifices in that measurement? Yeah. And then it gets more and more interesting, because the very nature of our bicameral mind, our split mind, looks at things from duality. We have to contrast and compare light and shadow, good and evil, sunlight and darkness, you know, whatever it is. Everything has to be done that way, because we'll look at an experience based upon whether or not we've had something similar to that experience. Mm-hmm. Now, it's funny because people's models would keep them from having, like, the matrix experience I was talking about. For instance, somebody would come in and say they were a Qigong master, okay? So they get in a horse stance. I call it a horse's ass stance, because that's just me. I'm just funny that way. I said, oh, you're in your horse's ass stance. And he goes, what you're doing is Qi. And I said, oh, I don't think so. He said, get in your steady stance. And so the guy did. And I just touch him, and he go over backwards unconscious. And he comes back and he goes, that was not Qi. and the whole idea of Qi, again, is such a misnomer, because the problem is, when you assume something is based upon an electromagnetic energy, even if it's a subtle energy force, you now have instantly split it into the rules of duality. You now have to deal with a peak effect that then degrades over time. Mm-hmm. You also, I have a physicist friend, Dr. Claude Swanson, who says, you cannot possibly send energy at a distance and have a noticeable effect in a biological organism. It doesn't happen, because we give off 100,000 photons a second, okay? Biophotons. That's probably what we're projecting. The problem is, in order to have a noticeable effect, you would have to send so many photons that you would literally kill yourself. So the model is wrong. The model is wrong. And I knew this. Well, I started to figure this out. I had a model of quantum physics, and both books are sort of written that way, although I start talking about torsion physics in the second book, Physics of Miracles. That book's more my favorite book of the two I've written so far to this date. I don't like the way I said that. That implies a third book. No, go away. Leave. I'm here for you. No, you're not. Go. It's been stalking me for quite a while now, and I don't want to do it. I'm getting old. I just forget it, you know. You go away. But anyway, the model is wrong. And I started to suspect it was wrong because I would interact with somebody in a seminar or even in a regular setting and, you know, one-on-one, and they'd start spinning in a circle. Okay, where is that listed in quantum physics? It's not, okay? And then I started investigating. And I found out there was something called radar disease, radar operators disease, where the radar operators would spin like St. Vitus dance. They'd have seizure-like patterns and they'd spin in circles. And I went, well, that sounds familiar. Well, the antenna actually, it's a cone of energy that spins, that's torsion, that then gets compressed into a linear stream of electrons. And so what's really behind this is not the energy, it's the information of a pattern. And that cannot be measured in the electromagnetic spectrum because it is not electromagnetic in nature. And so that's what Tesla discovered. And all the physics that we're taught, everything we're taught, Einstein, I think, was an agent for the Rockefellers. Or was it the Rockefellers or was the other guys? I think it was the Rockefellers. When he was sent to the patent office in 1920, whatever it was, in Poland, that was owned by the Rockefellers.
Oh,
and so, yeah. Now, he did come out with a unified field theory in 1928, and he presented it in Warsaw, Poland, and it disappeared into the black science community after that. But they said he never knew Tesla, and Einstein and Tesla never met. Well, I show pictures in the seminar I used to, where you see Tesla and Einstein on a Navy ship in 1942, excuse the freak me Philadelphia experiment.
wow.
Yeah, so they knew each other and they worked with each other. And so you can solve this unified field theory if you don't use the traditional mathematics, but if you use Tesla's solutions. And Tesla's solutions are what the secret space community, the Space Force that Trump's talking about, which already exists, and he knows that, that's been going for a long time. You free this world and you teach the right physics, which I've taught for, well, the right physics. I found a more useful lie. If you teach the torsion field physics, which is the Russian physics, you understand its implications to free energy. You understand with torsion, there is no loss of energy at a distance. It doesn't degrade in signal strength. You can impart information onto it and send it to any distance instantly, like in radionics or telepathy or distance healing. Those are your models. Then what happens is that spin, which has information on it, gets unfolded like an email at its source and imprints in the biofield, the photon biofield of the person, and that's where your energetic effects occur.
Yeah.
So you see how the model could be totally wrong and yet appear to be right. But it is such a limitation to think, look, if I have to like breathe funny, I used to do this in seminars. I'd say, all right, now I'm going to teach you a breathing exercise. This will help you with matrix energetics. Said, everybody take a deep breath. Now breathe out. Now breathe in again. Now keep doing that the rest of your life and everything will be fine. You know? That's all there is to it, you see, because there's this idea you breathe in and the prana is in the chi, and the chi then gets stored, and then the stored chi becomes a reservoir, and then that reservoir you can project at a distance. That's all wrong. Now, William Tiller, who is Professor William Tiller, advanced physicist, he wrote the foreword for the first book. But his model is based upon prana or chi. And I told him, rabble rouser that I am. Here I'm telling a world-class physicist that he's wrong while sitting at the lunch table with him at a place. And he didn't take to that too well. He went and investigated Eric Pearl at that point, which is a whole nother different story. The Black Pearl and Captain Jack. If you have the wrong model, you can't do things based upon a wrong model and expect the result that would be outside of the calibrated physics. And so either the science is wrong and it can't be done. Michio Kaku, who I've lost a lot of respect for him, he wrote a book called The Physics of Impossibility. And I was all excited. I saw the title. I said, oh my God, this is so exciting. It was about how all the things like the Philadelphia experiment, invisibility, all these other things, distance healing, were impossible. I'm like, yeah, you're a shill. I'm not interested anymore in a word that you say. The other guy, I don't even think is, all these arrogant guys, I care nothing for them. I'm an arrogant guy, I guess, but at least I know I'm humbly arrogant, you know. Because I've thought for a living. I've tried to do stuff. I've then found stuff that worked, and then I said, well, how is that possible? That's one of the things my chiropractic president at the school told us the first day of school. Said, always ask, why is that? Now, it doesn't matter if you know why something is. It matters that you ask. Same thing with unfolding consciousness in a model of enlightenment, for instance. The question dissolves the questioner. The question is not meant to have an answer. It's like when Ramana Maharshi, he told his students, ask, who am I, right? Who am I? And Robert Adams, who I really like, Robert Adams, he said, to whom does this thought come? And you keep asking that, but you see there's no answer. Nobody's going to answer the door, no matter how many times you knock. But what happens is eventually the question becomes absorbed and the questioner and the question become one, and there are no answers anymore. And this is the thing, it's not about the acquisition of knowledge. This is why I don't call myself a healer, because then you've just restricted everything to this little box, and whatever your box is, oh, I'm an energy healer. Oh yeah, I'm a light worker. I'm a light warrior. I'm a light warrior having a war with a light worker. You know, it just gets ridiculous. The whole thing's ridiculous to me. All these labels restrict free flow of information and consciousness. And the more humble you are, the more ignorant you are, the more clueless you are, the more likely that you can get out of your own way and something can actually move through you because you've made yourself an empty vessel, which then can possibly then interact in a pattern and do something useful. But you have to lose the idea, and this is where that quantum thing gets really sticky. You have to lose the idea that you're the doer, because as soon as you do that, healer, healee, you've set yourself up with an impenetrable barrier. Now you have to be really powerful, like Zeus, the lightning god. You have to be able to affect someone with a bolt of energy that's so strong that it affects them. And it overcomes entropy, which is impossible using that model. By the way, there will always be entropy. There's always be the degradation of whatever effect you're going for. If you change the model where you understand it's all consciousness based, in fact, the only thing there is consciousness, now you let go. You stop trying to affect change. You stop trying to be the healer. You stop trying to, quote, heal cancer or whatever it is, and you go to the point where you're not even, like when I work now, and even when I'm talking now, I'm not aware of what I'm going to say next. I'm not aware of what I'm going to do next. I don't even care anymore, because you get to the point where you trust that moment that's occurring right now, and there is nothing else, and there never was anything else.
That's right. Yeah. In my book, I'll talk about just being, you know, and not having that plan, or, you know, in scripture, be still and know that, you know, that I'm God, or, you know, and then I heard that one time and it was like, be still and know that I'm God. And I'm like, okay. And then it was just be still. And then I'm like, okay, I'll try to do that. And then it was just be. And then I'm like, at the time it was like, how do you be? Like, how do you do that? And then it's just like, it does take practice when you're used to being a human doing instead of a human being, if we're even human or whatever we are. But I'm just saying, and I like too what you were saying about who do they say I am, this guy or whatever. Same thing with Jesus. Who do they say I am? And they're like, okay, going back to the thing, because I do remote scans. I know you do remote healing, and I've studied Adam. There's a young kid who started at 16. You probably heard of him. He was doing remote healing to an astronaut long distance who was dealing with cancer. And so I started watching his DVDs and stuff because I had my own cancer. I hate to use the word, but had my own health issues years ago and had to remember being me again to get back into me in order for my body to do what it was supposed to and remove any of the things that were keeping me from being me. That's why the book is called The Science of Miracles, Remembering the Frequency of Love. If we can stay in love and God and just be, then we can do everything because God is everything. So we can do everything because God's in us and God's in everything. So, but when you were working with me, for number one, you have no idea probably, but you brought out like this wolf to like work on the wolf and as a surrogate, I guess, long distance. Yeah. And with absolutely no knowledge whatsoever that wolves are like my thing, because my last name Sharnael Wolverton was my maiden name, Sehon. So wolf has just been like I have wolves everywhere too, between Superman and wolves. That's my thing. So you're like working on me, not knowing anything. I mean, you're knowing everything. There it is. Yes. So you were knowing without asking. You were just knowing, and you were going with that. Hey, an average person might just be like, I'm not sure why I got this dog out and I'm going to work on this dog. But you were just like, I'm just going to do it, and went with it. And I love how you were just like very whatever and started working on whatever. And then I actually felt like spinning. I don't know if you remember that, but when Dr. Chow told me about you, which thank you, Dr. Chow, I know you're watching this. He's my acupuncturist and works at the clinic. And when he told me about you, all I had was your name. So I found a couple things on videos where you were like barely touching someone and people would fall out. I've been part of like different ministry of revivals in the past when I was doing that circuit, and saw there's a guy named Todd Bentley and several others that they would just like pray in Jesus' name or whatever, and people would conk out. But I would never conk out. I never fell down. I never like had an experience like that. I never felt, woo. Some people would laugh, some people would cry. I just didn't experience that. And sometimes I would literally go to some of these meetings, whether it was Canada or, Lakeland or some of these huge things where thousands of people. And I would be like the only person standing. I would be like, maybe this is my night, and like everyone would be laid out and passed out and like unconscious, like, I literally, people who wouldn't even believe in it, people who would come and didn't like, they just wanted to come to see, I dare you to do this to me. And I would be believing it, and they would be laid out, and I would be like snapping my fingers over them, and they're like totally gone. And when they would come out of it, they'd be completely healed. And I'll also have this like angelic, encounter, and like God came to them and told them all these things about their life and all this stuff. And I'm just sitting there, whatever. Well, my spiritual dad at the time, he always used to tease when I would complain about that, because he'd say, well, they can't hold their liquor. He would talk about that being like spiritual liquor. He's like, he's like, you can tell when you're a real leader because, you know how to hold your liquor. He's like, somebody's got to be standing. Someone's got to be in charge. Everyone can't be just laid out drunk or whatever. So, but what's interesting is when you were working on me, I literally felt like I was dizzy for a minute, and I tried to like blow it off because I don't know why, but I was just like, well, maybe I'm low on sugar or something. And I was just like, okay, focus. I was like telling myself, drink some water, kept doing it. It happened 2 or 3 more times. And I was just like, whoa, I don't want to like quit doing this, but also like, I feel really dizzy. And then like, finally you said something like this, or you did this. And I was like, oh my gosh, I really feel dizzy. And you were like, yeah, sometimes that happens or whatever. But this whole remote healing thing, I do biofeedback work over like a real scan, like a remote scan, and I can pull up what's going on with people, and I send it back, and
Right.
people, it's very accurate. You know, it's not what you're doing is without machines and everything else. But, you know, but even trying to explain to people, you know, people say all the time, like, well, what do you mean you're sending me the energy? Explain it to me. Like, how does that even work? And it's just like, quantum, you know, there's no time and space. There isn't a time and space. And there's no me and you. Like, we're all one. We're in the unified field. Like, you know, frequency is affecting us, whether it's UHF or, you know, whatever, from electrical and cell phone and whatever. So it's like, why wouldn't this work too, if that's my belief system? But it's a perception, like you said, whatever people's programming is, whatever people's perceptions are, you know, if they think it's stupid, then, and what I see is it shows an absorption rate at the end of everything, right? It'll say like, oh, you upgraded 30% or 40% or 20%. And I have now figured out that if a wife will drag her husband in or her kid in, they're just like, I dare you, their absorption rate is only like 10 or 15%, because there's a resistance even electronically. It's like, nope, don't come near me, don't come in.
Lose the electronic model. I have always picked out the people doing this in the audience and dropped them unconscious just because we needed to get on with the seminar, you know, and plus they're fun. I once brought 27, I think it was 27 engineers all up on stage at the same time. And so what I would do is I'd get in a rapport with each and every one. This one's an electrical engineer. So I'd go to Zeusland or something, right? I'd get all electrical, and then bam, they're down. And I go, now what do you do? I'm a chemical engineer. I'd say, oh, I can do that. You know, it's bam, you know, it's like, they're all laid out, 27 of them, you know. It's not the model that they hold, because what they think is not relevant at all. It's what they actually believe at the core of their being, which they may not even have conscious access to. And since it's not really an energetic phenomenon at all, it's an information-based one. In other words, well, I like the way Jed McKenna put this. Jed McKenna, another guy, everybody should read Jed McKenna. If you're interested in enlightenment and laughing at the same time, read Jed. So Jed said something very amazing. It's an equation. He said, there are only two things that exist: awareness and appearance. And one of these is not true. Game over.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's it. Game over. So, I mean, all of our assumptions, our biases, our preferences, so on, and none of that enters into that. I had a guy who was probably over 300 pounds, big old guy, sitting there with the arms crossed, and it was on a Friday night. We used to do these free, events, and turned out he was I think he was an engineer. He might have been a physicist. I don't remember. But his boss basically had been to a seminar. His boss was a physicist, and sent him. He said, I'll tell you what, you go see the seminar. If you don't like it, I'll pay for it. And you don't have to stay. But if you do like it, you pay for it, right? So the guy's sitting there, and everybody else is having a big time, and he's not enjoying himself. So I brought him on stage, and this morphic field, which is what it is, it's a field effect. It's not me. It has an attitude. I raised my hand in the air like this, and he lifted up off the ground, went flying through the air, hit the stage hard, and was unconscious for 40 minutes.
Wow.
And he's like, yeah, I'm going to go to the seminar. But I didn't do anything, you see. It's that idea that you're the doer. It's like Jesus talked about the hem of his trailing garment. Well, it wasn't so much about Jesus performing miracles if there was even a Jesus, and we have whether there is or wasn't, we don't have any reference for whether there is or not. We can't prove that. They talk about that in seminary school. There's no actual historical proof. That doesn't mean that now, though, however, there isn't a Jesus that has a morphic field that's bigger than that Jesus that we imagine might have existed, ever would have been. I make this point. Okay, I've been saved literally by angels. I mean, things that look like angels, what I call things with wings. I've had brushes with death in cars that I won't spend the time talking about it, but basically I was a dead man, absolutely dead, and saved, completely saved. Well, once I started really pondering what Jed said about there's only two things, awareness and appearance, and one of them is not true, I thought, well, at the enlightened level of awareness, nothing exists. It's all God, so there is nothing. There is no substance, right? And so it's all consciousness as awareness. So I thought, well, how could I be saved by angels? And I started calling them virtual angels, virtual reality constructs. But realize something. How many people have prayed to me? I mean, there's a lot of people that believe on me at this point, but whatever, right? But how many people have prayed to me versus the millions of people that prayed to Archangel Michael over the centuries? How real is that construct going to be versus you or I? That construct is going to be able to do things we can't even imagine, even if ultimately it and nothing in this reality is real. If this is dreamscape land, in the dream, that's a very powerful dream to be having, right? So yeah. Look at it that way, then you can get pretty humble. I have no idea what's going on, and I don't care. Let's pretend to do it, right? And then you just show up, and time and space and importance and the need to be right, the need to be powerful, it all goes away. And what's left is a baseline of I don't know, I don't care, and I'm available for whatever occurs next.
Yeah. I think in love for me is like the whole thing is just being pure and knowing that there's a God and knowing that God is, has our best interest or source power, whatever you want to call it, he, she, whatever. I don't think it can happen.
I don't even think any of that matters, because God, if there is a God, it would be everything. And God would not care. I mean, yes, we have gods that we've made through our consciousness awareness and maybe hundreds of millions of years old, right? These beings. But God per se doesn't care one way or another, but it's what Jesus said. The hairs of your head are numbered. No sparrow drops dead without, care. Everything is also consciousness, so it's all linked together, so it all is evolving towards this wonderful outcome. But it's not an outcome that we in our minds or in our imagination or in our desires or in our constructs of what should be or shouldn't be would have to hold. It's not something you can hold on and say, well, here's the kingdom of heaven, there's hell down there. Well, yes, that's virtually actually true, because how many people put energy into that for how many centuries, right? Never mind that they made up the devil in, I think, the 14th century or something like that, because Jesus was so super powerful, they needed a villain that he could go up against so they could have a good comic book. I mean, that's basically what it is. They admit that. But once you've created Satan, or once you've created even Jesus, the evangelical Jesus, like Oral and Anal Roberts, they were twins. He's talking about a 900-foot Jesus that was going to come and take him to heaven if they didn't give the church $1 million. I said, well, that Jesus is an asshole. He's an extortionist, but that was his Jesus. He's going to take him to heaven. This Jesus, this 900-foot Jesus is going to kill me if you don't give me $1 million. Oh, that sounds like extortion to me, but all this stuff, there's room for all of it in Dreamland. And in fact, I like what Jed McKenna said. He said, however ridiculous things get, like UFOs or aliens or flaming Jesus's 900 feet tall, whatever it is, the more ridiculous, the more improbable, the more likely it is, because in Dreamland, everything goes. But then if you want to transcend that at some point, which you come to a point in matrix energetics, I always thought the thing that was the most important was the transcending of the model. And a lot of times when people would go for a spin, or they drop unconscious, or they do some weird gymnastics, that changed their model. Mm-hmm. Once they allowed one little thing to change their model became open-ended. And it became a question rather than an answer. And once it's an open-ended question, it just
leaves room. Because because energy and quantum physics would say what you focus on, you make room for. But if the focus has changed, or there isn't any focus at all, then some new thing can come in. There's room for it.
There's room for it, and the idea that this moment is what's real. Because you can't verify the future, and you can't recreate the past except for in your mind, and your mind is a mechanism. I'm pretty sure of that. That's what David Bohm said. He said, most people have thoughts, but they rarely think. There's a big difference between having thoughts, because what do? we take our models of our perceptions and our beliefs and we cycle them. And we create our reality to be congruent with what we've perceived so that we can keep our world safe. We have our nice little safe space, right? But once your safe space gets dissolved, say you get abducted by an alien, or you find out that, well, this guy that I think is really a bad guy is actually a good guy and saving the planet, or you see Superman or whatever it is, your dog talks to you, you know. Now there's a difference in your perception that allows for, in that moment, and it's all about grace, that moment allows for a different question to be asked. And the question that can be asked that's worth asking doesn't have an answer.
So, and we only have like a couple of minutes left here, but since you brought that up, I want to just have you even just 2 minutes at least, which is pretty much impossible, but you're talking about a different perception. Right now, there's all kind of things coming up out of the Shadows video. I just interviewed David Rodriguez, the boxer, the champion boxer, who was talking about the stuff going on with Hollywood. All the stuff's coming out in Hollywood. You know, there's stuff with Trump stuff and the virus, and you know, people are remembering, people are understanding things and getting new things that they've never thought before, or maybe they had a hunch and they just weren't going to vocalize it. You know, speak a little bit about that in just like a couple of minutes, literally. Well, I know
it's not going to make me popular, but I think Trump is like that father that's talking to Superman saying, you know, my son, my only son. You know, I think he looks at America that way. I think this guy has a heart of a lion, and he is absolutely pure. I mean, sure, I mean, he's rough. I'm rough. I mean, my God, I've done everything you could imagine, and I can get away with it because I've got all that charisma, and he does too. But I mean, it's not about that. It's about what your intent at the core of your being represents, and that is love, and that's what I see. So can you imagine for a moment, if all the Tesla technology is known, and it's been in the secret space program, and somebody, I don't know, maybe a president, knows about all of that and starts releasing that to the people, that the oil market goes down, it's dipping right now. The stock market crashes. A new financial currency comes in based upon gold or something else. The states all go into bankruptcy. So the debts are all forgiven. My God, you have suddenly a society that has free energy, knows about space travel. We've got a Star Trek, literally, I think we've got a Star Trek Space Force already and have had for 60 years or more. But it's not been in the hands of people that have your intentions at their best desire. This whole race, this whole thing has been built upon pedophilia, satanic sacrifice, bloodlust, blackmail. That's been the currency. Drugs are not the currency, unfortunately. Tortured children are. This is again the light and shadow. And so ultimately, it's all unreal. But when you're in the middle of it, and you can rescue a child, and I've done plenty of this for helping children. You can rescue a child, or you can stop autism by stopping toxic materials and vaccines, which I know Trump knows this because he tweeted out in 2014. Kid goes and gets a bunch of shots, autism, terrible, must stop, you know. So, but you've got a whole world that's built around a false light matrix that looks one way, but is actually completely another. That out of the shadows thing you're talking about, which is a great video. I like the idea of having hope. I'm not completely, it's like I don't get excited. I get excited, but I don't get aggravated, you know, about the ups and downs, like this is bad, this is wrong, whatever. I'm at the point now, it's like, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could have a golden age civilization? Wouldn't it be wonderful if everybody worked together, if everybody loved, if the so-called prejudices and so-called racism and all the labels were just wiped away, and we were one people, not a one world, new world order, one people in heart and mind dedicated to the freedom of the individual. What a wonderful life and planet this could be. And that brings me to tears to think about.
Yeah, and yeah, I think I shared with you that, and many people who follow me and have followed me for a couple decades, I've had several encounters with Trump. I was first two angels, messengers, whatever you want to call them, came to me in 2007 and told me to start praying for him. that seemed like, okay, why? And then another time I had a dream that he came to me, sit at the foot of my bed, and asked me to come with him. He brought me into this room, and he was holding my hand. He dropped my hand, he put his hands in the air, and he started looking up, like, I don't know who he was talking to, but he said, help me make America great again. Help me make America great again. And he was like so passionate and so real, and like tears streaming down. And he was so like, and I remember like looking up, because he's really tall, and going like, no one would believe this. Like, no one would believe that this is how, like, what he really is thinking or feeling, or like, this is like really at his core. And a couple weeks later, it came out that he was running for president, and that was his, make it America great again thing came out. And I was actually invited the September before his election to meet with him in Florida. And this is not a dream, this is in real life, to meet with him, to talk to him about some of these things that I had, because I had shared this with someone who knew him, however that works. And they said, can you come? And I was actually supposed to be in New Zealand that week doing a conference with several other people. And I said to them, I would really like to go, and also maybe we can go another time. And I actually thought, I'll just go another time. I didn't think that would be my one shot ever. And they said, well, can you please just type out everything that you heard or know or see or what you've been told? So I did. I typed up this huge thing, and I've gotten mail from him a few times in the physical, not a dream, not a vision, that kind of stuff too. And so, like him or not, I'm really excited about the, Tesla stuff. He slipped a few times and said generators instead of
I don't think he ever slipped. I think
no, he's not slipping. He's dropping like Q, whether he's Q or not, dropping these like little snippets for people who have ears to hear, generators versus ventilators and all of that, just giving us who are listening hope that, because like you said, if we didn't have, debt, we didn't have all this stuff, and also we also had, instant beds to lay in and be completely healed and don't need pharmacia or pharmaceuticals or anything anymore. If we're just like scanned instantly and we're completely healed and whole and don't need to take any pills or do anything else, then, and yes, the secret space program has been around for a long time. I was a part of some of that stuff as a kid, and I've shared some of that with you. And I'm actually interviewing Corey Good in a little bit here, and also Laura Eisenhower, who's a good friend, has kind of helped me process some of the things that have come up in memories and different stuff having to do with some of these projects, like Looking Glass and the Montauk project and some of that stuff. So she's texting me right now. That's interesting. So, but yeah, so quantum, that's how that works. I'm on the phone and she's texting me because I say her name. But this is how energy works, right? And so I'm excited about seeing what's going to happen. And I love following your posts. I love your posts that you post because I'm tracking with you.
Thank you. Yeah, well, it's funny because my friend Chella, who does teach with me in some of the seminars that I do now, not matrix energetics, we started tracking the mind control stuff. And then she started tracking the sun. Now she's been in various teachings and also followed Ramtha some time ago. And her consciousness is in a very different place than most people at this point, which I won't really talk about because that's her thing. But she was talking about the sun. We both started talking about the sun, and all of a sudden Trump's talking about the sun and sunlight healing the virus and talking about putting light directly in the body. He said that today in the conference. I went, and he said a couple of days ago, he said, a year from now, you won't even recognize the healing art, something he said, the healing medicine. So
yep. The healing technology or something like that, which I was like, I know what that means. That's awesome.
We can 3D print. It's already been said, we can 3D print food for the whole world right now. Yep. Mm-hmm. But we've got the replicators. We got the Star Trek replicators.
Yeah,
I know that Montauk was real, and the Philadelphia experiment was real, and Looking Glass is real, and all these projects are real. And so all of these things about time travel and teleportation and so on and so forth, instant manifestation, all of these things have been there for so long, but they've been in the hands of people that do not have the best interests of freedom at their heart. It's more about control and a new world order and slavery.
Yeah.
And so that starts to crack, and it is cracking. You'll know it's cracked when the media starts addressing the president with respect. That probably won't happen. But at some point, for instance, if the chemtrails are no longer in the sky, in Russia, I'll tell you something interesting. Putin. In Russia, there are no chemtrails. I went over to Russia and I was teaching seminars there, and I love the Russian people. Well, I love everybody. But I mean, I was over there and I looked up, there was not a single one, and there never has been while I've been there. And so what's possible may or may not occur. And to be attached to that is, again, another trap, so to speak, because you don't want to tie your horse to an imaginary cart. You want to allow things to naturally unfold. And if you think you're the doer and you can force this to happen, I think it's delusional. But it is happening, and that's beautiful.
Yes. Well, we are a little bit over on time. I wanted to thank you so much for your time. I might have to get you back again if you will ever come back. I'd love to do a part 2. But please tell the audience what your website is and how people can connect with you, just so we can. I'm going to send a link out with all that information, but just verbally.
Yeah, it's i-hrt.com, and it stands for International Harmonic Resonance Technology. And there's a whole series of seminars that I teach that are not matrix energetics. Melissa Joy Johnson and I are still teaching matrix energetics on a limited basis for various reasons. Melissa has her own seminars. Check in with that. We'll give you a reference for that. Her books are fantastic. I highly recommend them. I think you get a kick out of particularly my second book. People would like that. It's a lot of fun. It's funny. I got a review published about the physics of miracles in a physics journal because the name of the book was The Physics of Miracles, but they obviously had not read it because it makes pretty much fun of everything, and you're going to go into trance reading it. So I don't know what they got out of that. But I do have physicist friends who are fascinated with what is possible with the technology that I teach about. And it is a consciousness technology, and it is worth checking out. I also do private sessions. I'm going to start to do sessions that are about 7 to 10 minutes long and try and do a super session where I can get a lot done in a short amount of time for less money than I would normally have to charge. So all those things, you can look into those. But I'm just grateful to be here, grateful to interact with you. And it's just a really special thing. And I hope I did I said something useful for somebody.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And you can actually find me at swiftfire.org. And please do go to my Facebook and hit the follow, not the friend, or subscribe to my YouTube, because that way you'll know about some of the upcoming interviews and classes that I have for everybody who's listening. Like I said, we have Laura Eisenhower, the great granddaughter of Dwight Eisenhower, who's will be coming up this week. Also, Corey Good, who was part of the space program, the secret space program, for several years since he was 6. He's 50 now. He's done several 20 and backs, which we'll go into. I have actually a physicist named Brooks Agnew, who you might be familiar with, Dr. Richard. He's going to be talking about time travel and quantum physics, which is a fun topic for me. I like that. So, and then also I have Barbara Evans, who is going to join me in a class just with basic sacred geometry, which is something that a lot of you guys have been asking about. And we finally decided to team up and do something on that because it is a universal language. And I think it'd be something good for hopefully you guys to do with what's left of this quarantine, to maybe not watch the programming, but maybe get some other ideas and truths, and expand the mind a little bit in some other areas. But do stay tuned for that kind of stuff. I'm looking forward to it. And thank you again, Dr. Richard. I know we'll be in touch, and I'm actually going to send you my book and some other things too, just as a thank you. Tell Kay thank you. And thank you again to Dr. Chow, who introduced me to you. You guys are awesome, and have a good night.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See if I can